Also, thank you, my friends, for finally remembering my phone number. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Was the exclusion of John Paul Jones an obvious sort of...
Shut up.
No. An obvious.
Oh, it don't matter. It's just that Jonesy was busy and we're busy.
Hi guys, this is the making of Coverdale Page, Part 2, with Robert Plant, Fate of Nations.
So let's talk about 1993, a year of great movies and visual moments. Music-wise, album sales painted a very different picture from the rock and roll revival of the last 2 years. Because Jimmy Page and Robert Plant released their albums on the Year of the Rooster, I'll give you some context on the market first. Top 10 albums included Mariah Carey, Garth Brooks, Janet Jackson, Celine Dion, Toni Braxton, and Ace of Base with their incredibly catchy tune, All That She Wants. Rock and roll was represented by Aerosmith, Tom Petty, Bryan Adams, and my dear friend Meatloaf with Bat Out of Hell 2. I believe this one is better than Part 1. You guys know I hate his debut album, but Part 2 has very good moments. As a kid from the 90s, I can't remember how many times I heard Rock and Roll Dreams Come True on the radio at the dentist's office. I hated those visits, but Meatloaf managed to give me hope and wait for that special sticker they would give you at the end. Next on the charts, positions 11 to 20, we have Sheryl Crow, who had recorded her cover of Led Zeppelin's Jamaica by then. Pearl Jam and Nirvana deliver obscure albums that many forget to this day. Counting Crows scored a hit with Mr. Jones, a song I personally despise, and local cover bands added wood into that fire. The Cranberries arrived with Linger, Billy Joel and Melissa Etheridge released their singer-songwriter works, and R. Kelly and Snoop Dogg added their urban musical perspectives and grooves to the mix. Next, all these other albums sold well above the 2 million unit mark. I won't go into much detail here, I'm sure you recognize many of these album covers. It gives you an idea of what rock and rollers went through back then. Both Dazed and Confused and Last Action Hero injected a powerful dose of crunch guitars and heavy drum beats at the movie theater. And just for the record, Dazed and Confused director Richard Linklater made several attempts at having Page and Plant allow the use of Zeppelin's rock and roll in the film. They didn't return his phone calls.
Off by critics in the 80s for being a Robert Plant wannabe, has now joined forces with Plant's old Led Zeppelin partner, guitarist Jimmy Page, and they've made a record together.
And I was wading through scores of demo tapes from different vocalists, and nothing was inspiring me whatsoever.
The last thing on earth I wanted to consider was reforming a Whitesnake or forming a Whitesnake and doing a Whitesnake album. I really had enough of flamboyance and all that stuff.
It is rather curious that Jimmy Page, the architect of Led Zeppelin's influential sound, is now working with David Coverdale, whose 1980s band Whitesnake was so often accused of copying Led Zepp, even by ex-Zepp frontman Robert Plant.
If Whitesnake or somebody nick a couple of riffs and the drummer actually learns how to play the bass drum properly for a bit, and they actually get it together for a couple of tracks, then look what happened.
Why not get together with David?
We've worked together almost 2 years now behind closed doors or whatever. Not on a concentrated basis, but without any kind of question mark of personality clash or whatever. I didn't want to go for notes that only dogs can hear. I had no choice with him. I had to go for it, mate. And there's not a lot of chest beaters left, so he had no choice but to grab hold of me. And the loincloths at the cleaners.
Can't wait.
We both agreed almost 2 years ago that we would want to and feature Zeppelin, Whitesnake, and
can't wait.
Whatever we feel.
I mean, even when we were writing the numbers, for instance, Boys, one you referred to earlier on, when we got that together, we were saying, well, this is going to be
opening
a great
track, yeah.
Yeah, we talk about opening tracks.
Would you be doing any Yardbirds in Deep Purple by any chance? Would you go that far
Well, there's
back?
a hint of Yardbirds on one particular track on
Whisper of Prayer.
Whisper of Prayer. There's a nod of respect. I was an enormous fan of the Yardbirds, even what we call the commercial period, right through the psychedelic or psychedouli or whatever.
I was a fan of the Yardbirds when I was doing studio work and jumped at the opportunity to join them, so that's how much I like.
One of the things that's exemplary about Jimmy's past work, particularly the Zeppelin work, is the actual sonics of the record. That when he remastered it, it gave a little more breath, but it still stood up before, without a doubt. If it was current radio status where you have all of these tracks segued together, there was never any date on the sound of Led Zeppelin.
Legendary Led Zeppelin guitarist Jimmy Page recently teamed up with former Whitesnake frontman David Coverdale to form the wittily named Coverdale Page. Coverdale's vocal style has long been compared to that of Led Zeppelin's Robert Plant, so the merger was not entirely surprising. But as they told MTV recently, working together was a spur-of-the-moment decision.
One day we went, bugger it, let's go, and walked around Manhattan, and literally, you know, a couple of squealing breaks and stuff. You guys going to be working together? We looked at each other.
Sure, let's see how we get on.
Well, indeed.
Well, sort of, you know.
Speak for yourself.
The music is such.
One man who's likely to be buying that new album is Led Zeppelin's superfan Mitchell Winnick, but it depends on whether he's got any money left. Why? Because he just splashed out $87,000 on building a swimming pool designed to look just like the double-neck cherrywood Gibson guitar that Jimmy Page played in the Zeppelin movie The Song Remains the Same. The heated guitar pool at his California home took 5 months to...
Secret, with the most effective ingredients you can get to help keep you dry, cool, in control.
Coverdale Page was released on March 15th, 1993 via 3 labels: Europe by EMI, North America by Geffen, and Japan by Sony. The album sales figures were positive. The total numbers by 1995 had this at 1,260,000 units sold. 2 promotional videos were released for both Pride and Joy and Take Me for a Little While. MTV rotation helped the record build momentum. Now let's address the elephant in the room. It seems this album was released in the wrong time and place, past the heavy electric guitar vibes topping the charts in 1981 and 1982. Looking at Geffen Records' discography back then, I'd say the perfect time for its release was 1992. Why? Well, 1991 had Geffen's marketing team promoting User Illusion and Nevermind. 1993 had them busy with Aerosmith, Counting Crows, and once again, Nirvana. There was limited record label manpower to promote Coverdale Page, with Get a Grip released a month later. So what took David and Jimmy so long? Well, there's 3 possible answers for this. First, remember Coverdale and Page joining Poison on stage back in May 1991? Well, Jimmy fell into a pit and broke his ribs at age 47, which may have forced him to take some time off. Then there's Page allegedly taking almost an entire year to record his guitars. Examining the layers of sound, riffs, and solos from the record, I can tell you as a guitarist myself, he really worked the strings with much attention to detail. It's not an easy album to make. Don't be fooled by music critics who, of course, rarely know how to play an instrument. Achieving this modern Guitar Army sound takes time. Now the third reason for the album's delay is a sad one, unfortunately. David Coverdale's mother passed away on August 8, 1992. David said Jimmy was, quote, gracious and supportive, thus their work was put on hold, which speaks greatly of Page's human side in collaborating with Coverdale. Jimmy's mother passed away in 1990. He really understood and felt what David was going through. Page and Coverdale's management team tried to launch a tour 3 times, but there was no interest from concert promoters. I've heard rumors through the years that Coverdale wanted to play big stadium-sized venues, while Jimmy was okay with smaller concert halls. I think this is true to some extent because, if anything, Page learned a tough lesson from his 1988 Outrider tour with low ticket sales for many shows. Coverdale, on the other hand, came from Whitesnake's massive concerts, thus why he insisted on a big tour. A 45-date US tour was announced with Vince Neil as opening act. To everybody's shock, the tickets didn't sell. Their popularity was not as big as Coverdale thought. The tour was cancelled. Now let's take a look at the rock concert market for 1993. This really answers the question why Coverdale Page had no chance with well-known promoters. There's Aerosmith's Get a Grip tour, Bon Jovi's Keep the Faith tour, Paul McCartney's highly successful The New World Tour with Hope of Deliverance, a huge hit single from his 1993 album Off the Ground, Pearl Jam's European and North American tour, the final year of Guns N' Roses until 2001 with their Use Your Illusion tour, Van Halen's Right Here Right Now in support of their hugely popular live album and video, Peter Gabriel's Secret World Tour, Metallica's Nowhere Else to Roam, and Def Leppard's Adrenalize World Tour. While Coverdale had a wide selection of songs, Page had a limited solo offering, thus playing Led Zeppelin tunes had to be there. Having David sing these was tricky and a risky proposition. In between the remasters box set and Robert Plant's dismissive comments about Coverdale's cover version, it seems Page was once again a prisoner of his past. Quite an unfair position to be in, with the media outlets adding unnecessary drama to the situation. Sometimes it seems Robert doesn't want any of his former bandmates to be happy. The constant bashing and sudden love for Zeppelin gets tiring after a while. John Miles did a very good job on the Outrider tour, but the public seemed to be unforgiving. They wanted Robert Plant on vocals for the Zeppelin stuff. Maybe Page was right in not performing these songs with The Firm. Maybe The Firm was destined for riches after 1986. I'm still puzzled why they didn't continue, really. Mean Business was a great record. March 23rd. Independent Worm Saloon by American rock band Butthole Surfers was released through Capitol Records. Another of his strange but refreshing music ventures, John Paul Jones produced a 17-track album and played bass on track 16, The Ballad of Naked Man. This is a must-listen for avant-garde music lovers. The 90s gave us some of the best experimental records ever. This one deserves to be revisited.
Singer Robert Plant has a new single just out, Calling to You, a preview of sorts of his upcoming album Fate of Nations. What's it all about, and what does he make of his old Zeppelin partner Jimmy Page's current liaison with ex-Whitesnake belter David Coverdale? Let's find out. All aboard. Fate of Nations, the title has sort of a political tone to it. Have you been disturbed about what's been going on?
Well, Kurt, it's not political. It's just concern, general concern about where we are and what we're doing about what we're doing.
The inevitable Coverdale Page question, what do you make of it?
Well, I don't know whether it's inevitable, because some people don't say anything about it at all.
Well, I'm not one of them.
But you're having a good time, Kurt. The man's got integrity. He's a fantastic guitarist. And he needs to play, and he needs to get out and do what he's got to do. And I think that all this sort of talk about the way, all this kind of rivalry, doesn't matter. I've watched that video, and I think they're having a great time together. You're laughing at me because you think I'm full of shit.
Plant tends not to take the music business all that seriously, especially such laughable phenomena as what he calls lead vocalist syndrome.
May 25th, 1993, Robert Plant's Fate of Nations was released. 4 singles were chosen: 29 Palms, I Believe, Calling to You, and Tim Hardin's If I Were a Carpenter. Fate of Nations was a milestone and a sort of sonic comeback album for Robert after 5 years of electronic keyboards and overprocessed hard rock moments. Following Nirvana's Road to Riches, Plant took the manic part out and went back to himself, the roots, the organic wisdom of less gear and more songwriting. But now for some shocking information. Are you guys ready? Looking at historic record sales, Fate of Nations sold half the albums Coverdale Page did, and this was Robert's heavily promoted 6th studio album. It managed to score just 100,000 records more than Plant's lowest charting release back then, Shaken and Stirred. Being the music industry a numbers game, you can see the writing on the wall. Plant's manager and staff could read between the lines. Following Robert's tradition of not touring with the same band for more than 2 albums, his lineup changed once again. It was goodbye for guitarist Doug Boyle and drummer Chris Blackwell. In came Francis Dunnery, Kevin McMichael, and Michael Lee from the Fate of Nations sessions. Charlie Jones and Phil Johnston remain on bass and keyboards. Everybody except the drummer did backing vocals. Having two guitar players with monster rhythm and lead chops created a stronger, grungier, and rejuvenated explosion, where Manic Nirvana was a bit more linear. The new guys had a very special stage presence that elevated the Robert Plant experience to new heights of rock and roll delivery. Thing is, if you watch the 1988 and 1990 concerts, Robert looked like the school teacher leading his students on stage. 1983 was a different story. Both guitar players were experienced cats who really understood their emotions, tricks, and power. They had the same natural cool vibe of Robert's first band, which made him relax and enjoy the show from the singer's perspective only. I sensed Francis Dunnery looked like the guitarist Plant always wanted to be. His skill and crazy behavior was unique. He had the vibes of sort of being Robert's brother. Kevin McMichael was a perfect counterpart mystique for an overall guitar construction of Led Zeppelin sounds with a modern feel. British blues singer, songwriter, and guitarist, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. If not, please somebody tell me. Ines Sibben replaced Kevin McMichael for the North American and second European part of the tour. A very good team player who kept the group energy intact. Robert Plant's 1993 worldwide tour was divided into three parts. First off, a European tour from April 28th until July 16th, visiting England, Czech Republic, Hungary, Austria, Germany, Italy, Spain, France, Denmark, Netherlands, and Switzerland. There was a lot of planes to catch as some of the dates were not linear. Around June, the band played England, Denmark, Netherlands, Switzerland, and Italy on the same week. Leg 1 ended with 2 shows in the UK, Birmingham and London. This series of shows included several festival and crazy television appearances. Robert Plant was the opening act for Lenny Kravitz on some of these festivals. Yup, he opened shows for Kravitz, the guy from Led Zeppelin. Imagine that. Nothing wrong with Lenny Kravitz, it's just he was 11 years old when Physical Graffiti was released. Now let that thought sink in.
Facciamo vedere le immagini perché abbiamo documentato le immagini dell'arrivo. È la prima volta che Rock c'è un elicottero che porta un artista, quindi vediamo queste immagini. Video music.
What happens here, Michele? Chiede.
Gino, fagli un caffè. Come on.
It's marvelous. The helicopter was like, and the storms everywhere. A little bumpy, yeah. And then we've been playing with Lenny Kravitz in Milano.
He's my wife.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. How long you had her?
No, te lo dico perché che è mia moglie, perché...
Every minute, but how much for your wife?
No, non è come una volta. No, it's not like in the Indian people that you bring 2 horses and something and I give you my wife. Non è come dagli indiani pelle rosse che ti porti.
This is pretty imaginative television, boys. Woo!
È simpatico avere delle rockstar, eh? È un po' un casino, però.
L'hai voluto? Non lo so, però.
know, you have long hair and you are Robert Plant.
If it's okay if I can be Robert Palmer sometimes.
No, not Robert Palmer, Robert Plant.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
So
Led Zeppelin song.
Is
now.
that my wife?
Which one?
That one. No. Is that how much for your wife?
No, not for my wife. Do you like that one?
Yeah. No. Is this
one.
television real?
Yeah, we are live on television.
Okay, then I'll be quiet.
Next on the agenda were 50 shows in North America, but it has to be said, most of these venues in the United States and Canada were not the big arenas from previous tours. While it looks like a lot of concert dates, the places were getting smaller. Once again, Robert's management took note. He was selling tickets, yes, but maybe Fate of Nations was a confusing picture for many. We could speculate the Zeppelin box set and grunge effect had something to do with it. Both Page and Plant faced similar business problems, and the rock and roll market slowly whispered chance for a reunion. The forest didn't echo with laughter, but hope. I believe Robert's changing lineups every 2 albums hurt his product. Yes, he had hits, but at what price as a collective unit? The shape-shifting image he played since 1982 reached a technical dead end, despite having his strongest band ever. The more you look into it, getting back with Jimmy was the only card he had left for big bucks. The fact that he didn't record a solo album until 2002 feeds this theory. Walking into Clarksdale doesn't really count as a solo album. More on that on the episode for 1988. Last part of Robert's 1993 tour was a 13 concert date series throughout Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Germany, France, Italy, Belgium, Holland, and England. The average setlist for the tour featured all 4 massive singles from Fate of Nations plus B-side Promised Land. Solo classics Tall Cool One, In the Mood, and Ship of Fools were played with subtlety and attention to detail. The songs from Principle of Moments were given much needed justice, with B-side Through with the Two-Step played twice on tour.
This is a song from 1982. So move with me gently, oh so slow, hold me, and baby, oh, you'll never let go.
This band could really tackle the old material without hesitation nor overplaying. The sound of Michael Lee's drums plus vintage distortion sounds was a sweet spot for Robert's material. Now onto the Led Zeppelin covers. While they stuck to a regular selection of 5, this is the list of all Zeppelin numbers performed on the tour at least once. It's safe to say this band laid the foundations for future Jimmy Page Robert Plant endeavors. It's the template for the 90s reunion, revival, remastered, revamped, money-making nostalgia trip.
And high, oh yeah. This life, come on, get high.
nominated for 2 Video Music Awards, and he's joined on stage by Led Zeppelin's John Paul Jones. Ladies and gentlemen, Lenny Kravitz!
September 3rd, where Robert Plant was the opening act for Lenny Kravitz, John Paul Jones played with him and his band for the 1983 MTV Music Video Awards. Kravitz ended up winning Best Male Video for Are You Gonna Go My Way, an album with historic sales of almost 4 million copies. Quite a rockstar moment for Jones, back in the mainstream spotlight for at least one show. His cool and chops are second to none. Go Jonesy.
He's nominated for 2 Video Music Awards, and he's joined on stage by Led Zeppelin's John Paul Jones. Ladies and gentlemen, Lenny Kravitz.
Led Zeppelin's Box Set 2 was released on September 21st. The 2-CD collection featured all the songs left out from the 1990 set, plus a previously unreleased track and one of my personal favorites, Baby Comin' Home, recorded in 1968 for the band's debut album Sessions. A 54-page booklet offered a retrospective essay by Rolling Stone's David Fricke with many cool images from each time period. The box set cover seems to be a zoomed-out photo negative of the 1990 remasters cover, in a similar color style to the 1992 version. Not the most creative design department, right? A similar photo negative effect would be used for the 2014 remasters run. The track listing on the set is for hardcore Zeppelin fans only. It's B-side paradise, but the running order makes you think not much thought was put in. Some of the songs are next to each other just like the studio albums. Examples: Brown Out R, Down by the Seaside, Hot Dog, and Carouselambra. Unlike the 1990 set, Moby Dick and Bonzo's Montreux are featured as standalone tracks. So because my patrons and PayPal supporters appreciate my obsession for detail, I went ahead and created a different running order for this box set. One that I believe has a better flow for any type of Zeppelin fan, and one that doesn't put songs from the same album next to each other. For this one, I decided on opening tracks Out in the Tiles and We're Gonna Groove to set the mood in 1970. Next, 3 acoustic numbers provide a sonic balance that gets your ears ready into early day Zeppelin rocking numbers. Another batch of songs change perspectives with Baby Comin' Home slow tempo effectively going into Down by the Seaside. Next 3 songs bring out the element of fun to make room for the great adventures of Carouselambra and what I think was one of Zeppelin's best closing tracks, Sick Again. For disc 2, I chose 4 tracks that showcase John Bonham's groove and expertise on dynamics. 2 acoustic guitar cuts lead a transition into the lyrical absurdity of Darlene and Living Loving Maid. 2 blues numbers display the maturity and evolution of Jimmy Page and Robert Plant with the genre. Next are 4 tracks led by the killer combo of John Paul Jones and John Bonham. As with a live show, we reached the end with a massive drum solo and Led Zeppelin's early day favorite, How Many More Times, where Robert Plant would introduce its members to the audience. Box set number 2 is one of the least commercially successful Zeppelin releases. It sold 650,000 units less than Celebration Day and just 59,000 more than the complete studio recordings. Despite the artwork being nice and the Zeppelin momentum, it was what it was. The complete studio recordings was released just 3 days later on September 24th. The 10-disc box set included all Zeppelin studio albums plus a special version of Coda with all 4 bonus tracks from box set 1 and 2. 4 box sets in 4 years. Quite the marketing attack from Atlantic Records, right? I'm sure record buyers were either puzzled or didn't want to spend the extra cash for stuff they already had. Complete studio recordings is the lowest charting release from the Zeppelin catalog at 200,000 units. This wasn't cheap back then, so it makes sense. It's a 10 CD collection, a luxury item for very lucky fans. The outside box shows a clever photograph design of the inside of a Zeppelin. You can check my episode of the making of the New Yardbirds for the story and development of these airships led by Ferdinand von Zeppelin. This set was no longer in production after the launch of 2007's overly compressed Mothership. A 12 CD mini LP replica set was released in 2008 to a limited number of 5,000 copies. Interesting fact about the 1993 set is that discs 5 and 6 have Houses of the Holy and Presence next to each other, with physical graffiti on discs 7 and 8, which creates a funny timeline issue with Presence before graffiti. A black cover was chosen for each album as well as an essay booklet by Cameron Crowe. Unfortunately for Into the Outdoor, the brown paperback was selected instead of one of its 6 album covers. What's up with the designers thinking this was a good idea? I found one of these sets for $55 at the exchange in Pittsburgh's Robinson's Township back in 2019. It was a business trip, meaning I saved tons of money on shipping and handling, but my record buying budget was gone after visiting 4 record stores in the city. Attic Records and Jerry's Records were my favorites. I also didn't really have any extra luggage nor carry-on space for the plane. I regret my decision of not buying the $55 set to this day. But hey, I bought a copy of box set number 2 at Attic Records, so it was worth.
For years they've been saying these things would change the world, would mature from adding machines and typewriters to tools of the human spirit. Now, maybe it's coming true because of Internet. Internet is a growing grid of independent computer networks interlaced. It's evolved from a U.S. military bulletin board in the 1970s to a worldwide computer switchboard.
Michael? Thanks, Jerry. I think everyone knows exactly what the circumstances are right now in terms of my decision not to play the game of basketball in the NBA. I talked to David Stern as of yesterday and even today, and I'm very solid with my decision of not to play the game of basketball. When I lose the sense of motivation and the sense of to prove something as a basketball player, it's time for me to move away from the game of basketball.
Whatever he decides to do, I'm behind him 100%.
The only thing that disappoints me is the fact that we had always planned on retiring together.
It's disappointing the fact that the league is going to miss his biggest star.
He says no one was ever better than Michael Jordan. He was a true joy to watch on the court, whether he was your opponent or your teammate. I know opposing players hated guarding Michael for obvious reasons, but also out of fear that Jordan would make one of those great moves and the defender winds up looking silly on one of those life-size posters that's plastered.
The spring rains continued falling and the rivers began rising. A wet spring would evolve into a record-breaking summer.
It's digging a pretty good-sized hole, probably 5 feet deep right now in front of where that levee was. And the sandbags are being washed right down in there with it.
It's getting bigger by the minute. Before too long, this is going to be a major break in the levee.
Just now lifted off the foundation, and it's just crumbling in the rapid and the violent waters here that are coming through this levee break about 3 miles south of the Jefferson Barracks Bridge. We've watched...
MTV reached out to Robert Plant and offered him to do Unplugged. He turned it down a few times but later agreed. While he could deliver a set list from his best solo career moments, Robert knew Zeppelin songs would be expected. To think about laying down his former band's material on tape for MTV made him realize the only one who could play these was Jimmy Page. Plant's management got busy in aligning the stars to get Page involved. Jimmy attended Robert's November 20th show in Boston, which led to a meeting in which both discussed working together. While Robert has been quoted saying any problems from their past was water under the bridge by then, let's look at this in terms of money. With Fate of Nations entering shaken and stirred sales figures, Jimmy's Coverdale Page tour not being picked up by promoters, and the Zeppelin box set frenzy, getting Page and Plant together for a network broadcast at the peak of grunge was the right business move 13 years after Led Zeppelin tragically stopped. Now let me throw in a very interesting fact here. Robert Plant, and eventually Jimmy's manager as well, Bill Curbishley, met with Warner Chappell for a reversion of Zeppelin's publishing copyrights. Because the legal period in the United States was 20 plus years, the band's first songs from 1969 were to revert. Warner didn't buy this, so Bill went out looking for publishers. Warner got scared and offered $30 million for administrative rights of the catalog. Once Curbishley got Zeppelin's royalties back, Jimmy felt he should have had a bigger percentage being the producer of the catalog. According to Bill, his former bandmates agreed to give Jimmy an extra bit of cash on the basis of Page's producer credit. This 27 interview with Bill Curbishley is gold. Jimmy eventually fired him as a manager. I believe the Unplugged John Paul Jones beef didn't escalate beyond a comment here and there because everybody got paid good money on their past Zeppelin efforts. But still, as we will see later on, Jones didn't deserve to find out through the newspaper.